Yo, what is up guys, it's Aqsept here. If you're anything like me, then you've probably noticed the insane win rate that Aurora has currently. And if you haven't, she currently sits on a 55.75% win rate in Toplane Masters Plus. For those of you who don't know who I am a professional League of Legends coach, and I have previously coached professional teams as well as players. Recently, I've been spamming Aurora, and I'm currently sitting on a 67% win rate at over 50 games in Masters on the EU West, hence why I decided to make this video, so that we can all unlock the most that this champion has to offer. For the sake of the length of this video, I am going to assume that you have some sort of clue what each ability does on Aurora. If not, I recommend going into practice tool and trying them out, or reading the abilities on the wiki if you do not own the champion. Although, we are going to talk about some interactions that you probably don't know about or haven't spotted in your game so far. The main thing to note with Aurora abilities is that their Q and E are the same ranges. So generally, you want the Q and then E as your combo. This will allow you to reproc your Q as well, and it disengages the trade with your E, so it's hard for enemy to trade back and you will get a quick burst of enemy HP. Additionally, you can combo your QE combo by flashing as well. So what you want to do is just QE flash. Generally your Q and E both have a cast time, so if you do it fast enough, both of the abilities will follow. One important thing to note about this is that the abilities will aim in the same direction that you initially aimed in. So what I mean by that is that if you hover over enemy champion as shown on screen right now, and you flash to the side, it will still target towards enemy champion. Aurora Q scales off missing HP, and generally you want to save this ability in fights to proc stuff like Leandris or just get more damage from the missing health, but if you need to use it to proc your passive, you can do so. Also, think of this ability a little bit like Saya E. If your opponent stands in front of a lot of minions that you have your Q on, it will proc your passive once per Q that it passes through them, so look for opportunities to hit multiple Q pullbacks at once on enemies. If you flash during your W invisibility, you will remain invisible, but not if you do any other actions like Q, auto attack, etc. Sometimes your screen will remain grey as if you were invisible, but that's just a bug, and if you look above your hotbar you can see the invisible effect disappears as soon as you use an attack or ability. When it comes to runes, this is the main rune page that I recommend. The most important things to pick up in this rune page are fleet footwork, as it gives you movement speed that allows you to kite or gap close against an enemy, and that also allows you to proc your passive to then chase down said enemy, and Transcendence, as it synergizes heavily with the resets that we get on our W and thus allows us to clean up a lot of fights and skirmishes. The banner runes can also be important depending on what build you choose to go, which we'll discuss soon, and generally Cut Down and Alacrity are the best in-slot runes that we have left. But if you plan on going boots like Tabais or Mercs and generally can't afford to go CDR boots, then I'd recommend Legend Haze instead of Alacrity. If you want to, you can also go Electrocute. There are certain matchups where this is better, such as Jax and Renekton, where you will be guaranteed to proc your passive whenever they wish to trade with you, and where you value the flat damage more than the movement speed. I would then recommend going Taste of Blood and Eyeball Collection, as these have the most guaranteed value for your champion. And then Ultimate Hunter, as Aurora has a very high base CD on her ult, and is also very reliant on the ult being up, as it is her strongest tool. When it comes to stat shards, I recommend going Attack Speed, Adaptive Force and Scaling Health. Attack speed generally helps trade patterns and CSing. Adaptive Force is in my opinion the best in the slot in the middle row, and Scaling Health generally has the highest value. But if you feel like the early game HP will play a role, then you can choose the flat HP instead. Item builds is one of the most interesting parts of the game when it comes to theory crafting and guides. And while we could probably sit here and speak about every different item and build option for a long time, I will give you what I personally have had the most success with and what I've also seen other people have the most success with. The build I like going the most is Leandris into Cosmic Drive and then Sonya's Hourglass for third item or Riftmaker. This synergizes a lot with the double mana runes in Presence of Mind and Mana Flow band, as we don't have to go a mana item while still not having any mana issues. Aurora is a champion that in my opinion wants to play fights slow, with hit and run while stacking her passive and waiting for a good time to use ult to clean up. This build is perfect for doing just that, and is also generally the strongest when 1v1ing bruisers, which is what you'll face the most in top lane. For this build, I prefer going CDR or Swiftness boots unless you need either Tabais against an ADC lane or Mercs because the enemy has hard and reliable CC. If you want to, you can also go Sorcery boots, but I personally find CDR to be the better option, as with this build you will have little CDR before Cosmic Drive, which means it's harder to stack passive and you won't have ult as often. The second build is one I recommend you go when you face a lot of squishies and rely more on quick burst and ult usage. In this build, you will go Malignance into Cosmic Drive and then either Leandris or Rabadon's third, and in this build you will also go Sorcery Shoes instead of the CDR ones. This build allows us to have ult more often and in general have more burst damage. I like going it when I am facing ADCs or mages. For the third item, you want to go for either Liandry's if the enemy has some tankier champions, and Rabadons if you want to play for even more bursts. You can also go Void Staff if your enemies are going a lot of MR but not HP. On this build I also recommend you to go something other than both Mana Flow Ban and Presence of Mind, as this usually is overkill on mana. My personal recommendation is that you go Electrocute, as it gives you more burst and lower ult cooldown, which are two of your strengths when going this build. The last thing and most situational build that I will recommend is Roll of Ages into Cosmic Drive and then Liandry's Riftmaker. This build allows you to be a bit more tanky, and I'd usually recommend you to go this build with either Electrocute or Secondary Resolve, or even both. For boots, you want to either go CDR, Tab Ice or Mercs, depending on what's good for the game. You want to go this build when you're facing threatening champions that have a potential to kill you easily, and that you don't want to risk getting one-shotted by. This can include champions like Evelynn, Nocturne and Pantheon, as these are champions that you struggle to avoid getting one-shotted by unless you go this build. The main thing I recommend for the builds you go is that you try to stick to a similar build each time and don't experiment too much until you are very comfortable with the champion. What is most important is that you know your limits and how to play your champion, and the more you play a similar build instead of switching it up, the easier of a time you will have learning and getting good at Aurora. This goes for runes as well. It's much easier to climb by one tricky something rather than trying to be decent at everything. Let's start talking about how we should be playing in the laning phase. Before we do that though, I'd like to ask you all to like and subscribe if you are finding this guide helpful. It helps me a lot and it means a lot, and it only takes you a few seconds. I make daily videos and shorts, and I also stream on Twitch and do coaching in case you want to check that out. But moving on to the lane phase. Every matchup is of course going to have different ways to play optimally, but we have two main strategies to choose between for each lane phase. One will be when we're facing a melee champion, and the other will be when we're facing ranged ones. Let's talk about range matchups first. Outside of Gnar and Urgot, pretty much every other range champion will either outrange you or have ish same range as you. Often whoever tries to engage in a trade will be losing the trade, because if your opponent walks into your range you can easily hit your Q and D, and if you walk into their range you will struggle to hit your abilities. So what you want to do is play slow, wait for your opponent to make mistakes like trying to trade on you, and then you just wait to play for all-ins with your ult, and potentially look to trade when the enemy has the last hit minions by using your fleet footwork auto and W to gap close. Generally, the biggest advantage you have is that your ult is an incredibly good gank setup. So if you can ever get your opponent to flash, ping your jungler that you want to look for a kill with your ult once it's up, because most champions will have no way of dodging it. For melee matchups, we have a lot more room to play aggressive. Our trade pattern will pretty much always be auto for the fleet proc, Q, auto, Q, pull back and then E. If we can keep chasing for longer than that, it's fine, but generally we just want to take trades around our cooldowns and our passive. If we face a champion that jumps on us like Aurelia, Jax and Renekton, then feel free to disengage first with your W or E before chasing them down. The main thing to note is that we cannot be scared of trading with melee champions. If we are, then they will get an HP lead and then they can win the lane. But if we play aggressive, especially after a trade when they've used a dash to gap close on us, then we can get a good trade in and we can win the lane. You generally want to get your opponent low enough so that you can all-in them with your ult. You don't have to be too scared of getting ganked unless you face a champion like Camille, as in the worst case you can always ult behind you to run away from the enemy. But the main thing is to note that playing into melees is that we want to use our Q and E together with auto attacks to proc our passive, and bully melees out of lane, and then use our ult to finish the job. If we use our ult too early, then we will lose the safety in the lane, which means we can no longer play aggressive, and it also loses us skirmishing power. Into melee champions, you should always be able to get a lead in lane. And versus most range champions, you should also be able to go even and scale into mid-late game, which is a point where your champion can be very strong if we utilize our ultimate correctly. For more clarity on matchups, I have made a matchup tier list shown on screen. As you can see, most melees tend to be a lot easier, with the main exception being Yone, as he can trade on us without us really being able to trade back with passive after he uses E correctly. The main thing with this matchup is that we play aggressive before he gets boots, and this is generally the strongest power spike of Yone in the early game. And before that we should be able to get a lead. Your champion remains quite strong in the 1v1 throughout the game, as she has a lot of movement speed and durability, so playing on the sideline is a valid option. Especially considering her safety with ult, it's like a failsafe. If you ever overstep and get collapsed on, you can ult out. It's kind of like playing with Cloud Soul without actually having Cloud Soul. With that being said though, Aurora really starts shining once teamfights start. What we look to do is open up on the sideline and end with a teamfight. Your champion is not very good at pushing towers, but you can win the 1v1. So push out the side lane, force enemy to respond, and when they collect the wave, rotate mid and look for a fight with your ult. When it comes to teamfights, we basically have two modes. Playing slow with hit and run, and playing fast with burst damage. Aurora has three main strengths. She has high mobility, a lot of burst damage, and all her spells are AoE. What we lack is range and consistent damage, but we can play around that fact by using our mobility and add items like Leandris and Cosmic Drive, as they allow us to deal more consistent damage and have lower cooldowns. Generally, we will start off by playing fights slowly, going for quick bursts with our QE combo and stacking our passive. Once we feel like we have poked down the enemy enough, or where we can catch someone off guard and kill them quickly, we use our ult. The main thing is to not stress using the ult. It is our most powerful tool. If we use it too early, we no longer have the option of playing fights fast when we need to. Meaning enemies can go unpunished more and we will lose agency in the fights. Often if we move from the side lane, it's fine to engage fights with our ult. This is because at that point we will already have an advantage coming into the fight, considering enemy side laner will most likely still not be in the fight, meaning that if we can catch someone in our ult, then we'll be able to force a fight with a numbers advantage. If you are looking to catch someone using your ult, I'd often recommend you first W outside of their vision range, so that they don't see you right before you ult, and then you lock them in the cage. If you play with Malignance, then the build still plays the same way. The main thing though is that you are weaker with your base abilities, but stronger with your ult. So you want to look for skirmishes more often with your ult, and look to use it as often as possible. Generally, you will be weaker in the 1-1, so instead of playing more on the side lane and looking to duel people, you will look to push out one wave on the side lane before rotating mid and looking for a fight. You have a lot more burst damage with this build, so you can use your ult sooner without having to worry about not killing anyone. And on top of that, your ult can be a great engage tool if you know that you have follow-up. So utilizing Malignance plus Ultimate Hunter in your runes can be a great setup for success. Now, with all of this being said, I do hope you found this video helpful. If you for some reason did not, then I appreciate any feedback you might have. And if it did, I'd really appreciate it if you like and subscribe. I'm currently uploading 1 video a day, as well as 3 shorts a day, and in the near future I plan on making an Italy top lane guide as well, which is something I play a lot of myself and I've climbed Grandmaster with before. You can also join my Discord if you want notifications or want to ask me anything, and the same goes for my Twitch, where I stream daily. But with all of that being said, I hope you all enjoyed, thanks for watching and stay tuned for more.